Welcome along, everyone. Kia ora koutou. I'm Saya Warlick, the Chief Executive Officer of Cooperative Business New Zealand, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Rob Beard, who is a modern workplace architect from our corporate associate member, Cyclone. So thank you so much for joining us today, Rob, to talk us through this really interesting topic of Windows 10 and the upcoming end of support by Microsoft and what that might mean for cooperatives and also cooperatives members and how they might help their members to get prepared. So really interesting topic, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot more about it. So over to you, Rob.
Awesome, thank you. Just a quick intro from me. So I've been working at Cyclone for about 3 years, last sort of year and a half of which working as the modern workplace architect. So I lead a team of subject matter experts in the device management space. So we help customers develop their strategies for managing their device fleets and help securely manage those devices and in the most efficient way possible. So yeah, let me kick things off. I'm not allowed to share my screen at the moment.
Let me just make you co-host.
Perfect. There we go. All right, so Windows 10 end of support, as you say, quite an interesting topic. It's something that affects everyone that's using a Windows computer, which is almost everyone these days, although there is a bit of diversity out there in different devices, but it's definitely a lot of Windows out in the market there. So basically, the headline at the moment and what we're sort of talking about is at end of the year on the 14th of October, Windows 10 is no longer going to receive generally available support from Microsoft. So what does that actually mean and what does it entail? So basically, after that date, Microsoft is going to stop giving out free security updates and support for the Windows 10 operating system. They're going to stop developing new features, going to stop developing patches, and basically going to say the system will still work and the devices will still continue to operate after that date, but they're not going to receive the caring attention from Microsoft that they once enjoyed for the last 10 years. Windows 11 is out at the moment. This has been out there for about 3 years and is the successor to Windows 10. So the main messaging from Microsoft is that people should be upgrading to Windows 11 because after that date, not going to receive any of those security patches and things like that. So that is basically the sort of problem that we're discussing at the moment is that, Microsoft is going to be ending support for Windows 10. So how does this affect you, the audience, and everyone that's using Windows 10? So the end of generally available support basically means, as I've mentioned before, Microsoft is no longer going to be providing security updates and new features, and also general technical support for Windows 10. That means that if there's a problem down the road that gets picked up, let's say next year, there's a major problem detected with Windows 10 and everyone's panicking about, oh no, this is going to cause some disruption. Microsoft is clearly saying and has been saying for a while, no, we don't support that product anymore. That's going to be a security vulnerability that you're going to have to live with, and there's options available to you, but one of the options isn't us patching Windows 10. So that's a fairly big deal. That's security is a huge major issue as we'll sort of elaborate on a wee bit further on, but it's definitely something to be aware of. But this isn't a problem just sitting with Microsoft. This is all of the different bits of software that companies have developed to run on Windows 10. They'll be moving along to newer versions of Windows or Windows 11. So if there's a problem with that piece of software that's uncovered or they develop a new version, they aren't going to be testing that on Windows 10. So if you're still using Windows 10 into the future, those software vendors will just leave you behind. Their products aren't going to support or they're not going to test functionality on Windows 10. So if you try something and it doesn't work on Windows 10, they're not going to care, is the sort of short answer to that. So why is this a problem that you need to be really worried about? So this is really speaking to a problem that's definitely not something specific to Microsoft or Windows. It's software in general and other sort of parts of the IT space, is that unsupported software is a risk. It's a situation that you don't want to be in where the manufacturer of some software that you depend on isn't getting any support from the manufacturer. You want to make sure that if you using some software that's really important to your business, that if you run into a problem with it or a problem is detected with it, the manufacturer is still taking care of it and they're going to fix that problem so that you can continue to use it safely. Specific to this conversation, operating systems are such a key part of the computer that the computer needs an operating system to run. Everyone is using an operating system of some description. So making sure that that is a secure piece of software that's getting support is really, really important. You can't just go, oh, it's all right, we're using some other software and we don't worry about the operating system. It's probably the most important piece of software on a computer. And then speaking back to the unsupported software, becoming reliant on older software, especially the older it gets, is really just embedding in that technical debt. And every moment or day or year that you are holding on to that unsupported legacy software, the bigger that debt becomes, and it becomes a lot more expensive and a lot harder to fix it the further down the road you get. If you hang on to software that's unsupported for years and years and years, it becomes a huge big snowball that it becomes a real big problem for your business to get out of down the track. And running software that only works on Windows 10, as we sort of mentioned before, that's even something today that's happening where companies are saying, oh, we're focused on developing our software only for the newest operating system. So Windows 10's only got less than a year on it, so we're not really going to test on that. Or certainly next year, companies that are developing that software, they're not going to worry about you anymore. And that also applies to hardware. So hardware that is coming out into the market might not work with Windows 10 into the future. So if there's a peripheral like a web camera or a printer or something like that you buy, it may not work with your Windows 10 computer next year or the years to come, simply because those vendors aren't going to be testing that hardware on Windows 10 and making sure that it works properly. It's not good news. Is basically it's all bad. It's So, and then just to sort of speak to that security vulnerability state, so a couple of snapshots from some articles on various topics of either running sort of software that's very old, doing important things for too long, or the impact that those sort of cybersecurity issues can have on organisations of all sizes. I've got a couple of sort of pulls here from CERT-NZ, which is the advisory body to businesses and government agencies in New Zealand for cybersecurity matters. And they did a report last year specific to SMEs across New Zealand, and it was their finding that the average cost of a data breach or a cybersecurity issue with an SME was around about $173,000. So that's a massive financial impact to any organisation, and some organisations won't survive that kind of breach occurring. Across to the right-hand side there, so CERT-NZ published what they call the 10 critical controls of cybersecurity. So there's no particular thing that's more important than the other. These controls are all important in their own way. But definitely, at the top of that list, there is patching your software and systems. Like this might seem like we sort of said it's an interesting topic. Some people might find this quite boring, but it's just simple IT hygiene, this kind of stuff. It's just keeping your systems and software up to date and patched is just really, really important to proof yourself against these really common issues that are becoming more and more common. There was, only just this morning was a major issue was announced with a particular vendor with their software, and the answer to that is make sure that you're on the most supported up-to-date version of our software, and if you stay on the older version that we don't support anymore, you're going to be in real trouble. So this is you've really got to keep your finger on the pulse of these sorts of things and make sure that you're patching your systems. So in terms of sort of nuts and bolts options for, okay, I've got Windows 10, what options are available to me and my businesses? So the simple option really is to upgrade Windows 10 devices to Windows 11. It's a free entitlement from 10 to 11 in most cases. So it's quite a simple upgrade to do. The code base underneath the hood between Windows 10 and 11 is actually pretty similar. So it comes down as a feature update. People might remember upgrading Windows in years gone by was quite an arduous process and lots of CDs driving around and plugging things in and sort of mucking around. The process from 10 to 11 is pretty simple. So that's definitely the sort of easiest option to go with. sort of next down the line there is replacing old hardware. So Windows 11 is a little unusual in that it has some fairly specific hardware requirements. A lot of these are tailored around security, but they have also drawn the line on older processors. So there's computers that are around about the sort of 8 to 10 year old mark and older. They won't be able to take Windows 11 generally. So you may have a computer that's got Windows 10 and it might run Windows 10 perfectly fine, but it's not able to take Windows 11. So you will need to replace that hardware with something new. And ensuring systems are on an appropriate edition of Windows. So we'll go into this a little bit more depth later on, but there are some editions of Windows 10 that are more seen in the kind of corporate space generally, or point of sale, that kind of thing, where they have a very special version of Windows 10 that's referred to as LTSC or IoT. And that means it's got a much longer support threshold. So it actually goes a bit further than October 2025. But those are very, very sort of edge case situations. They're very purpose-built computers. So, but yeah, the general sort of retail available computers, definitely that's the October deadline. Some of the more braver options. So Windows isn't the only operating system out there. We've got Apple Mac and sort of iPads, Android, and even Linux, if people are quite brave. So you're not necessarily, depending on what sort of systems that you use, you're not necessarily locked into a particular flavor of computer, depending on this is a good option, a good opportunity to hit pause and go, well, actually, if I need to do something, what's the right direction to take? And a lot of businesses are taking that moment to go, well, actually, upon reflection, like maybe this is where we change gears on some of our device management strategies. Maybe we do a bit more employee choice, where we say, well, actually, there's nothing that we use that's specific to Windows. Maybe Mac is an option, maybe even iPads for our really mobile employees where it makes sense, or sort of tablet computers. So it's definitely worth having a conversation with your IT provider or whoever gives you advice on IT issues. If you do need to make a change from Windows 10 to something else, is Windows at all the correct choice for you? Are you bound to Windows? And definitely sort of going further down the sort of braver options. If you've got things that absolutely have to run on Windows 10 and you don't have options to migrate away, then that's definitely where you need to sit down with an IT expert and go, right, how do I mitigate this risk now that I have, where it's either too expensive or too complicated, or there's just some issue that just means that there's a couple of computers somewhere that say, no, I have to stay on Windows 10 for this, and there's no immediate fix to this. There's lots of different ways to do that. There's a type of approach called like ear gapping devices, where you stop anyone from being able to interact with them, so they become a little island off in the middle of nowhere. And that does sort of protect them against some of the threats floating around, but that's definitely a case-by-case basis. If you're electing to voluntarily run that sort of unsupported software, you're going into that realm of starting up that technical debt and that risk exposure. So it's something that you want to take very seriously, and is definitely not in the simple category.
And so, Rob, an example. So, I mean, what would an example be of a device that must be on Windows 10? Like, can you think of any
There's
example?
a couple of different sort of options. We talked before about those kind of specialist computers. So if they're performing a task that is very, very, very specific, so it might be like a BMS system or building management system, where it's got special hardware that connects to like air conditioning units or something like that. Thinking of businesses that will be in that sort of co-op space, agricultural systems where they're controlling like siloing systems or sort of factory systems and things like that. Especially the hardware that comes with them, that might be very, very custom-made special hardware that is designed for interacting with a sort of grain feed silo or something like that. And the company that makes that siloing system has only ever tested their software on Windows 10 and isn't ready to go down the pathway of going to Windows 11. So you're really stuck with with that system for the foreseeable future. So there will be approaches that the vendor will, if the vendor's saying no, you have to stay on Windows 10, they will support the software, but Microsoft's not going to support you on your Windows 10 journey. they'll have ways to sort of make that a little bit safer, but definitely worth sort of seeking guidance on that. But yeah, so there's definitely some, and I think that sort of speaks to, computers are everywhere these days. Everything's controlled by computer, and there might be things where you think, oh, that's just a screen on the side of a building somewhere, but actually when you take the lid off, it's just a computer underneath potentially running Windows. Windows is a lot more common running things than you might think. If you go through the likes of Pack and Save, all of those self-checkout systems, they're all basically running Windows with a touchscreen. And they don't look like a computer, they don't behave like a computer. You can't go on them and check your email, but they are running into the exact same problems that we're talking about here. So, Pack and Save suddenly buying a whole bunch of new checkouts doesn't seem like a particularly good option. So, yeah, there's definitely some edge cases out there that you'll need to be aware of and start noting down across your business. If you start looking for those computers that are in funny places, would probably be my guidance. And questioning like, oh, that's it's just worked for years and years and years, but what actually is it? How does it run? What risk is it currently exposing to my business? In terms of if it were to stop working, I can't get support for it. That's how many days can your business survive not having that computer running, basically.
Yeah, sure.
And the last point there, just the extended security update program. So Microsoft has released some information which they're going to confirm later on this year. So for computers that have to be on Windows 10, you can purchase security updates on a yearly basis for the next 3 years. Initial guidance looks like this might be around about the sort of 60-ish US dollar mark per computer per year, doubling every year. So by the time you get to the third year, you're looking at $240 per computer. So that is definitely the kind of life support option for computers. If that in that space of you must be running on Windows 10, those computers might be candidates for the ESU program. They have said that is going to be conditional, so it doesn't sound like they're going to be giving that to everyone, but the details on that are sort of changing sort of month by month at the moment while Microsoft sort of settles on exactly what approach they're going to go with. So definitely a few different options there for the different ways that you can tackle this, but probably a lot of the guidance that I'd give to people is just be aware of what computers you've got and what sort of a criticality, what are the important functions of your business that rely on computers, and is that reliant on anything that's running out of support? So this type of conversation definitely goes wider than just Windows 10. If you've got a piece of software that still works fine, but has been long abandoned by its manufacturer, you should really be thinking hard about, well, if something goes wrong with the software or there's a change in the environment where it no longer works properly, are you in a position to be able to quickly change away, or are you going to be stuck for a long time spending lots of money trying to fix this problem that you're now in? So then, yeah, this is basically exactly what we're talking about before. So the different considerations that we're sort of thinking about. So the different types of computers. The real sort of easy ones are the personal computers and workstations. So these are the ones that you and I are using to jump onto this meeting, where they're just normal laptops. Generally, general office tasks. They use a bunch of different applications, mostly kind of web-based these days, but definitely a lot of sort of normal software. The hardware that you buy for these kind of use cases is generally just off the shelf, so you can just jump into the shop and buy one. So these ones are the kind of easy ones to look for and consider and figure out solutions for, because they're relatively commonplace. But definitely that kind of utility and terminal hardware is where it gets really complicated, because if it is running an unsupported version of software, a replacement solution for it might be incredibly costly. You may be stuck getting it from one particular company if it's doing something really, really specific. Especially in the kind of manufacturing and agricultural spaces, there's definitely computers out there that are doing a really, really specific function, and it's the only way to do it. It's the only computer that does it. It's the only company that provides this kind of solution. New Zealand's a relatively small market in the world, so some of the solutions that we invent are pretty bespoke and pretty creative. So making sure that there's support around to keep those solutions going is really important. Yeah. There we go. So some sort of real sort of basic guidance for some the watchers that might be sort of wondering, oh, is this computer on Windows 10 or 11? No one's, there's a lot of people aren't IT experts, so you might just be wondering, well, does this problem actually affect me, or am I already sorted out? So if you've got an IT support provider, generally speaking, they'll have a central management tool that they're using for you or that they run for you. And this will be feeding back telemetry and information that they can use to give you a report on, okay, these devices are Windows 10, these ones are Windows 11. They may even be able to provide you guidance sort of from that central dashboard perspective, saying, oh, we know that these ones, because they have this feature on the hardware, that they won't be able to take that upgrade to Windows 11. For the more sort of tech savvy, the WinVer command on Windows will tell you the exact version of Windows that you're running. And then the sort of less technical way is I've got there some screenshots. So the top sort of screenshot there is the default Windows 10 taskbar. So the main sort of indicative feature is far off to the left there. You've got the little sort of, I'll move my mouse around and see if that shows up. That the start menu button is the sort of white squares with a little sort of weird angle, kind of almost looks like a triangle. Whereas underneath there is the Windows 11 one. So the first sort of major thing is that Windows 11 has got its icons all in the middle. And it's got the blue sort of squares looking more like an actual sort of window frame to open up the start menu. So that's kind of at a glance, if I was looking over someone's shoulder and going, oh, this is the type of computer you've got. If I see these kind of things, I sort of know it's Windows 10 or 11. And if you think you're on Windows 10 but you're not 100% sure, I've just taken a quick little video there of opening up the settings application and then jumping into the systems section and scrolling way down to the bottom there. There's an about button that you can click, and the information on that page will tell you exactly which version of Windows 10 that you're on. So you can see down there, Windows Specifications Edition Windows 10 Pro. So that's absolutely guaranteed. That's, yep, I'm on Windows 10. That's going to end, it's not going to get support after October. I should start thinking about what I'm going to do. So that's just some quick and easy guidance there for someone who's wondering if they're on Windows 10 or not. So if you are on Windows 10 and you're not sure if the computer's going to handle Windows 11, because that is definitely a consideration, Microsoft has made a PC Health Check app, which is available online for free. It tells you a bunch of different things, but the main thing that we're interested in is it does a check on your PC to see if it's going to take Windows 11 without any problems. So what you're looking for is, after it does the check, is a bunch of green ticks, and it'll say this PC meets the Windows 11 requirements. I've put in a screenshot there of what happens when that check fails, and you need to either replace the hardware or start thinking about maybe some of those braver options. And it gives you the specific reason as well. So this is where you sit down with your IT expert and go, hey, this is this computer's got this thing preventing it from upgrading to Windows 11. What do I do? And there are some things that you can fix, things like system memory. Those in some cases with some computers are things that you can upgrade or change, but there are some things that you can't change, like especially with laptops, the CPU is generally not changeable. So if that's what's holding it back, then you will be in the market for a new laptop in that case. But yeah, this is definitely about sort of sitting down with that IT expert or that IT support provider and just working through these kind of things and going, right, what do I actually need to do?
And a scenario, so I've just checked mine and I look
Yeah, sure.
to the laptop that I'm on at the moment. So a scenario that you mentioned earlier around, devices or hardware that you might have, peripherals that is actually running on a computer, but you don't know that it's necessarily running on a computer. Is there a quick, easy way to determine what version those sorts of things are on as well, when it doesn't look like, your laptop?
Yeah, that's a good question. That is a good question. Generally the manufacturer will have a compatibility list. So if you search online for on like the vendor's website, let's say it's a like a Canon printer or something like that, Canon's website will generally list the software drivers that are available for download for that printer, and they'll list the software, the version of Windows and even sort of Mac, if that's applicable, that it's available for. So if Windows 11 isn't on the drop-down list, or if it explicitly says this doesn't work with Windows 11, then you know you've got a problem. But generally, depending on the hardware, I'd say just seek guidance from maybe whoever you bought it from. If you're not comfortable sort of looking around on the internet for information. But yeah, generally the manufacturers will tell you if it's got software support available for Windows 10 or 11.
Okay.
Sometimes as well, there's a piece of sort of third-party software in the middle. So if you're using a multifunction printer to scan documents, the scanner and everything might be perfectly compatible with Windows 11, but the software that you're using to capture the image from the printer might not be. So it's worth sort of checking all those points in the chain and going, okay, these are the things that I'm dependent on working into the future. Yeah, that's probably the sort of easiest way forward. There's so many different sort of peripherals out there. It's quite hard to give specific guidance on that. But I'd just say consult with the manufacturer and ask them about sort of what their support is for Windows 11. Definitely the change from Windows 10 to 11. There's not actually that much that's incompatible sort of software and hardware wise. That is mostly due to the sort of software underneath the real sort of heart of the operating system, which is called the kernel. Hasn't had a lot of change between 10 and 11. So they talk about sort of code compatibility. So there's not that much that causes issues between software and hardware between 10 and 11. So by and large, stuff that works on Windows 10 will end up working on Windows 11 from a technical perspective. Something to be cautious of is whether or not the manufacturer supports it. So it may be entirely true that a piece of software or hardware does function perfectly fine on Windows 11, but if the vendor's not supporting it, everything works until something doesn't, and the vendor will say, well, you shouldn't have put it on Windows 11 because it's not something that we're supporting. So a lot of this conversation is less about it technically working and more about getting support when something goes wrong, because you want to be able to make sure that when something does go wrong that you're going to get help in that situation, because you don't want to be up a river without a paddle.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So the easiest way to sort of get Windows 11 installed on a machine, and I'm speaking mostly about sort of Windows 11 here, just because that's the sort of natural pathway for most devices. And Windows Update is generally the sort of easiest way for people to download Windows 11 and get it on their machine. It's all basically fully automated. Got a screenshot here of a device in the Windows Update page of the settings app in Windows 10. So it's actually advertising saying that the upgrade is ready. All you have to do is click on a button and it'll install it in the background and restart the machine, and everything will be there and transitioned over. So this may have actually already happened to your device. They've definitely been trying to deploy these updates for, I think, a number of years now. So this isn't something that's new or is going to, be released in a couple of weeks. This is something that may have been actively targeting your device already. Windows Update as well is one of those places where it will say if it detects a problem with your device going to Windows 11, it will be telling you that as well, saying, hey, I want to download Windows 11, but I can't for this reason. So yeah, generally speaking, Windows Update is the easiest pathway to success here. Right. So the real sort of high level sort of advice that we're giving to customers at the moment is this kind of 3-point sort of step for us to plan, prepare, and execute. So that planning is all around sort of getting an understanding of, okay, what computers have I got out there? What hardware have I got out there that I need to be worried about that's not going to take, the Windows 11 upgrade that I need to make plans for? So if all of your hardware is compatible with Windows 11, fantastic. This, the planning is going to be kind of easy, but this is where you need to start the identification of those devices that are going to be tricky or might pose a risk in the future. Start sort of budgeting, once you've found that hardware that you need to replace, this is where you need to start that budgeting process, and just devices that aren't compatible need to be able to procure those later on in the year or immediately. It might be a moment to start thinking about, do I need to buy these outright, or is leasing a more palatable option? Definitely having a lot of customers with sort of around leasing and things like that at the moment, where kind of locks in that budget year on year, and you don't have to, every sort of 3 to 5 years come up with a bunch of money to replace your computers. It's just ticking over in the background and a new computer just turns up. So it's worth thinking about if you're not on that pathway already. And then in that sort of planning stage as well, depending on sort of the size of your organization and what sort of type of use cases you've got, there might be some modernization things that you can do. So how you manage your computers, if you've got a relatively large size device fleet, making sure that you're managing that in a modern way with tools like sort of Intune and from Microsoft, and you might already be paying for that sort of functionality with different types of Microsoft subscriptions. So it might be something that you're entitled to already and you're just not taking advantage of. So it's worth sort of exploring those options and seeing if there's things that you can do that make your life a little bit easier. These kind of systems can do sort of automatic updates and central reporting. And it's worth sort of looking into. And there's a lot sort of packed into if you're a Microsoft 365 subscription customer, there's definitely a lot of value in those subscriptions that people might not be aware of. So it's worth having a chat with your IT provider if you're in the space, and making sure you're getting as much as you can out of those subscriptions. Some of those apps, modernizing them to what we call software as a service, which is kind of typically web-based. So a lot of applications out there, instead of getting the software on a CD or downloading it from the internet, installing it and running it that way, it's a lot more flexible and a lot more modern approach to take the sort of web-based variant of it. So where you access it through a web browser, that means then that you're opening up a lot more flexibility in terms of you're no longer reliant on devices so much to run that software. All you need is a web browser, and almost every device out there has got a web browser now, regardless of what kind of system it is underneath, if it's Apple or Microsoft or Linux or things like that. So it's worth sort of checking with the software that you use day to day, whether or not they've got that sort of web-based SaaS variant or sort of cloud-based variant, which just gives you a lot more flexibility down the track. It's definitely a hot button issue at the moment. And it might be sort of appropriate. Tends to sort of be for sort of larger organizations. If you've got that sort of software that can't be modernized in the sort of SaaS way, might be looking at VDI or Windows 365, that kind of setup where there's a computer that sort of sits in the cloud far away, and it runs that sort of complicated software, and then your devices that you've got sort of sitting in front of you don't need to have that sort of weird and wonderful software installed on it. It's all kind of managed for you up in the cloud. And then just in general as well, sort of opportunities for modernization. So what kind of security settings you've got on your devices? Is there anything you need to be uplifting or changing? Is there stuff that you set up about 5 years ago and still use and haven't revisited? Definitely, this is a good time to just pause and reflect on how you're managing your devices and how you're treating them. If all your devices got passwords and they're complex passwords, you're leveraging things like biometrics and Face ID for passwordless authentication. And then just sort of modern life cycle sort of standardization. So are you replacing your devices every 3 to 5 years as per a regular rotation of devices, or are you just waiting until they break and then trying to find money to replace them? So maybe just having a think about, and sort of planning out that, life cycle of devices. So you're not sort of stuck in the situation where you might be at the moment, where you've just realized your device isn't capable of taking Windows 11, and now you're suddenly in the market for a new computer that you didn't realize you were. So yeah, just worth being on the proactive side of that conversation for sure. And then the second part of that is that the preparation works. Now you've got your plan in place. It's putting in those foundations for an eventual sort of switch over to Windows 11, or sort of migrating away from Windows 10. So as we sort of talked about before, actually going through and procuring those devices. A lot of the devices have sort of manufacturing bases or sort of funneled through the United States. The United States at the moment is in the process of implementing a tariff to imports and exports, which affects personal computers. So if you are in the boat where you need to buy new computers, the prices look like they're about to be going up after those sort of tariffs go in. So it's something that you want to be getting done sort of sooner rather than later. As people roll over into their next financial year as well later on this year, that might be where they're waiting for budget to buy computers. So there's definitely going to be a run on hardware this year, that's for sure. There's lots of different reasons, for buying new hardware. Windows 11 is a big one, and there's things we talked about before. So if you do need to buy computers, you want to make sure that your timeline for that is sooner rather than later. And then those preparation steps, if you've got that software that needs to be migrated, making sure that you're getting that rolling before you end up in a situation where you need to do that in a hurry. And setting up the communications and training plan. So, regardless of what kind of business and what size you are, any sort of change to IT, you want to make sure that your staff are upskilled into that new system, even if it's just, hey, the button for that is here instead of over there. It's something that you don't want to surprise your staff with and going, oh yeah, we just bought a whole bunch of new computers. Hopefully you guys can just carry on. So you want to make sure that people know that the change is coming, and anyone that's sort of a bit worried or might need some upskilling, need to make sure you've got that plan in place for that. And then that final point there is making sure that you've got some data safety measures in place. So if you are going to be swapping devices or upgrading the operating system on them, it's really key to make sure that the data on them is safe and secure. So we mentioned before about leveraging some of that value out of those Microsoft subscriptions. So most of them have got an entitlement for sort of cloud backup storage for the likes of OneDrive and SharePoint and things like that. So this might be something that you could start leveraging and start migrating data into. And devices that's not appropriate for, making sure that you've got a backup copy of the stuff that's on them. Really crucial for that kind of thing. If there's something that goes wrong on the device during the upgrade, or just in general, if the device is doing something important or holds really critical data, making sure there's a backup copy of it somewhere. Yeah, regardless of upgrading to Windows 11 and things, if you've got a computer out there that's doing something super important and has data on it that's really critical to your business, making sure that there's a safe backup of that is really important. Alrighty, and then the last stage is basically executing all of the preparation and planning. So making sure those sort of modernized platforms, and we talked about, I sort of mentioned Intune before about central device management, making sure those systems are in place and running. And depending on how many computers you've got, we sort of put in there a pilot phase. So it might be prudent to maybe upgrade 1 or 2 computers first and see how it goes, see if there's anything that goes wrong. There might be some software where the vendor says, yep, it's good to go, it's perfectly fine, but it's prudent to test it anyway on Windows 11 and sort of make sure. There might be a minor change. It might open up slightly differently. The icon for it might change and be in a different menu or something like that. So it's worth just testing the waters before you go wide on it. And then sort of rolling out that upgrade across the rest of the devices, replacing hardware where you need to, and doing the sort of Windows update style approach where someone just halfway through their workday gets the wee pop-up saying, hey, you need to upgrade to Windows 11. They book in a wee time, and sort of either later on or in a couple of days their computer will reboot and update to Windows 11 by itself. And then the sort of monitoring and remediation stage, so the edge case scenario. So and this is something that affects kind of, maybe larger organizations more than the smaller ones, but it's definitely something that it'll affect everyone. Is there's going to be edge case scenarios. There's going to be something that doesn't work quite the same way, regardless of if you're doing a Windows 11 upgrade or you're changing to, something like Linux or Mac or something like that. There's going to be something that doesn't go quite right. And you just need to be alert for what those are and respond to them appropriately. So if it's something that you're able to roll back to Windows 10 temporarily, just we'll make your computer functional again while we sort of figure out what's going on here. Maybe there's a piece of software that everyone said was going to be fine. You upgrade to Windows 11 and it's not fine. You need to be able to roll back and go back to the vendor and say, hey, you said this was going to work fine. Why hasn't it for us? And there might be a very specific reason for that. So it's just keeping your ear to the ground and checking in with your staff and saying, hey, how's that computer going? Is it going all right? Is, that training, did it work? That kind of stuff. So it's a fairly high level strategy, but it's had a lot of success with our customers. And it's basically just get the foundations ready, be prepared, and just be alert for the sort of stuff that will come out of the woodwork. So yeah, that's sort of it in a nutshell. Yeah, I'm just seeing with sort of the final slide there. In case anyone's interested in contacting Cyclone, this is us. We're in all across the country. And I'll stop sharing, and here we go.
Fantastic. Oh, thank you so much for that. I learned a lot, and I'm also very reassured that my own laptop that I'm working on today all looks to be all good. So it's fantastic. But yeah, I think for for cooperatives, there are a lot of small medium enterprises in that space, and a number of co-ops themselves have small medium enterprise members that may have differing access to IT resources or differing sort of experience and understanding and knowledge about the flow-on effect of this change and what it could mean. So yeah, I learned a lot about how to, I guess, think about that, get ready, and also be aware of all of the things that you might not necessarily think about day to day that do have computer power running them, that, as you said, could potentially be a vulnerability for you if that is not upgradable, or the vendor's not quite ready to support that transition. So yeah, really appreciate that.
Yeah, and there's definitely stuff that sort of sits in the background, and the mentality of if it's don't broke, don't fix it,
Mm.
doesn't apply in a lot of situations in the IT space. Or the definition of broken might be that someone's just, the thing is still working, but no one supports it. That's, in my
Mm.
mind, in IT. That's something that's broken. That's something that's
Right.
posing a risk now.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time where someone will set up a system and buy a fancy new machine that does something really really clever, and then 20 years down the track, some part of the control panel for it breaks, and that's when you realize it was actually just a Windows XP computer in a fancy box. And then you go, oh help, what do I do with this? This is
Yeah.
really really old technology, and the machine is still perfectly fine, but that computer might be what tells it how to operate, and
Mm.
set scheduling and all that sort of thing. So you might have this machine where you look at it and think, oh, that obviously doesn't, need any computers or anything like that. I don't use a computer for it. But underneath it's just, running some software that might be quite critical to its
Yeah.
operation. So yeah, it's definitely worth just being aware of where you've got dependencies on that kind of IT infrastructure and software, and just knowing where you might have some sort of weaknesses. And there's different strategies to solve those kind of problems. Like as I sort of mentioned before, there's some things that are just simply too expensive to go, oh well, I've got to keep the software up to date. I'll just buy a completely new manufacturing system.
Mm.
As well, that might be a multi-million-dollar affair. That's not, that sort of outweighs the risk presented by that something going wrong with that software.
Yeah.
But there's strategies to sort of insulate your business from those kind of risks. So it's worth just having a sit down with the vendors of that software or that system, with your sort of trusted IT provider, and making sure that the solution that you come up with is suits the your business objectives, but keeps you secure and safe. So
Mm.
it's all a balance of priorities, but yeah, it's just making sure that the risk exposure is at as smaller level as possible is probably
Yeah.
the high level thing.
Fantastic. I have one final question before we wrap up for the day. So, one of the, I guess, strengths of cooperatives is the community engagement and community give back programs that many of them have as part of the cooperative principles. And one of those streams, I do know a number of co-ops that donate their old equipment maybe to schools, or they maybe send it to the Pacific Islands where they don't have access, to as many computers, etc. Part of that that sort of scheme. So, in a situation where you may have, say, I don't know, a laptop or a device that actually can't be upgraded to Windows 11, am I right to assume that it's probably best to not donate that item and further the problem and push that security risk on? Is that correct, or is it a
Yeah, it's a really great question, and we could spend hours discussing the philosophical, the ramifications of, basically giving someone else your garbage, essentially. So we do have a couple of partners that we work with where they take that e-waste and they find good ways for getting a good amount of life out of it. There's different approaches you can use to put, supported software onto them. We sort of mentioned variants like, there's versions of Linux, which is different to Mac and Windows. There's definitely a learning curve with different variants of Linux, and it's not something you just want to jump into straight away. So that's why we work with these partners, and they're sort of subject matter experts in those fields. They make sure it's the right fit for where the computers are going. Sort of, as you mentioned before, going to places where digital equity is a challenge, or there's a digital divide, and just even though the computer's quite old, just getting computers into a situation can sometimes be a huge boost to a community. The ability to just work online can sometimes just be a major paradigm shift for some really, really remote or economically disadvantaged communities. So, but yeah, it's definitely worth going with a company or a partner that really understands those communities and knows where the equipment's going and the right value that it needs to give, because you definitely don't just want to embed those problems and say, hey, here's some old computers that no one likes, you might as well have them for free or something like that. You might just be further entrenching those problems or just transitioning the risk away from yourself. You're now just giving that risk to your neighbour. So definitely worth having a really thoughtful, conversation with wherever those computers are going, and making sure that they're being sort of exited out of the life cycle responsibly.
Sure.
But yeah, and that even feeds into, if the device does need to be e-wasted, making sure that it's not just being chucked into a landfill somewhere, making sure that it's going to a, responsible e-cycling facility. And there's a number of those around New Zealand.
Yeah, amazing. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. As I said, I've learned a lot. I think it's been an incredibly valuable conversation, and I really do look forward to being able to share this with Co-op Business New Zealand members. So thanks again, Rob, for your expertise.